This is Unit 7, Factoring Polynomials. So my screen looks a little bit different than our normal videos, but let's just focus over here. So we're starting with Section 7.1a, Factoring Polynomials with Common Factors. So here are our goals for the day. Find the greatest common factors given expressions. Factor out the greatest common factor, so we're going to call that GCF from polynomials. And factor polynomials by grouping. So what is factoring? Factoring is just basically reverse distribution property. So we like to think of it as turning addition/subtraction problem into multiplication. So here we take a multiplication problem. So this is timesing, and we're turning it into an adding problem. Now here, we're taking an adding problem and we're turning it back into a multiplication problem. So let's first start with figuring out what is a greatest common factor. So I have a little factor chart here, so that's why I have my screen split into two parts. So on this first part, 12 and 32. So on your factor chart, everyone should have a factor chart. If we look at 12, here are the factors of 12. So we have 1 and 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. Those are the numbers that we multiply to get us 12. Now let's go to 32. 32 is 1 and 32, 2 and 16, 4 and 8. Now the greatest common factor is what they share. So if we look, let's see, what do they share? Well, they both share a 1. They both share a 2. And they both share a 4. But the G stands for greatest. So the greatest thing that they both share is 4. So our greatest common factor is 4. So that's how we kind of use our factor chart. So the number on top is what we multiply. So 1 times 32 is 32. 2 times 16 is 32. 4 times 8 is 32. Okay. B. So m cubed and m to the fifth. So m cubed, that's the same as saying m times m times m. M to the fifth is m times m times m times m times m. Now, greatest common factor with variables is what they share. Well, they both have 1 m, they both have 2 m's, they both have 3 m's. So our greatest common factor is what they share. So it's going to be m cubed. So now what do they share? Well, 21, if we look, okay, here's 21. Oh, has a 7. This has a 7. So our greatest common factor is 7. Our x's, we have a 3 and we have a 2. So we're going to pick the smallest, x squared. We have a y to the first and a y to the fourth. Again, we also want to pick the smallest for our variables. So we say y to the first. We don't really need the 1. So that is our greatest common factor. Okay, 28 and 4. So let's go to 28. Okay, here's our 28. 28 actually has a 4. So they both have 4. So we're going to say our greatest common factor is 4. Now, if we look at our m's, we have a 2 and a 3. So the smallest m is m squared. And then for our n's is a 2 and a 5. So the smallest n is an n squared. So we're going to say 4m squared n squared. E. So we have 14 and 1. Well, if we go to 14, the only thing 14 and 1 have in common is the 1. So our greatest common factor, we know it's going to be at least a 1. Now for s, we have an s to the 4th and an s to the 1st. Well, s to the 1st is going to be the smallest. And then this expression has no t. So they have no t at all, which means our greatest common factor cannot have a t in it. So how did we find our greatest common factor? Well, we basically just take out the biggest factor, and for variables, take out the smallest exponent. So for the regular numbers, you're going to take out the biggest factor, and then for the variables, you're going to take out the smallest exponent that's shared between them. Okay, moving to the next part. So to factor out a greatest common factor from a given polynomial, start by placing the greatest common factor out front of a set of grouping symbols. So we have 8m plus 32. So if we look at 8 and 32, here's 32. 32 actually has an 8 in it, and there's an 8 and 8. So 8 is the greatest common factor between 8m and 32, because 32 can be rewritten as 8 times 4. So see how they both have an 8? So actually we're going to take that 8 out, and then we're going to write the inside as 8m divided by 8 plus 32 divided by 8. Now we're going to use division to help us find the remaining terms inside of the grouping symbols. Well, 8m divided by 8 is just m. 32 divided by 8 is 4. So there we have it. We can always check to see if our answer is correct by multiplying. 8 times m is 8m. 8 times 4 is 32. So checks out. So let's practice factoring a greatest common factor. So we have 8 and 10. So on our factor chart, everyone's going to go, here's 8 and 10 side by side. So between 8 and 10, what do they share? Well, they both share 2. So our greatest common factor, I'm going to put it over here, is 2. And then we have a p and a p cubed. So we're going to go with the smallest, so 2p. So we're going to divide both of these by 2p. Now the 2p we can't get rid of. We're going to put that out front. So we have 2p, parenthesis, 8 divided by 2 gives us 4. And we can always go back and look at our factor chart. What's the other number on the other side of 2? 4. What's the other number on the side of 10 for 2? Be 5. So we know that we're going to have a 4 and a 5. Our p's cancel, so we're left with 4 plus 5p squared. I know that inside the parentheses is not standard form. Let's just not worry about that for right now. Let's just worry about making sure that we are taking out the greatest common factor correctly. Number 2. So let's go to 18 and 12. So on my thing, here's 18. And here's 12. So they both share, I'll pick a different color, green. They both share 3. They both share 2. Both share 1. Anything else? Oh, they both share a 6. So if we look, our greatest common factor is actually going to be a 6, because that's the biggest number between both. And then if we look at our variables, we have an m and an n. So our greatest common factor is 6mn. So we're going to divide that out. Now when we divide, we're going to put our 6mn, our greatest common factor, in front of our parenthesis. 12 divided by 6 is 2. M squared divided by m is m. And then our n's divide away. We have 18 divided by 6, so that's going to be 3. Our m's divide away. N squared divided by n leaves us with just a single n left. Okay, number 3. So we have 5x cubed plus 15x minus 30. Well, right away I'm going to tell you our greatest common factor between all of these. So if we go to 30, we have a 5. If we go to 15, we have a 5. And if we go to 5, we have a 5. So our greatest common factor is 5. Now if we look, we have an x here, we have an x here, but there's no x on the 30. So x cannot be in our greatest common factor. So in this case, our greatest common factor is just a regular old 5, no variable. So the 5 comes in front of our parentheses now. So we have x cubed left, because these 5s divide away, plus 15 divided by 5, that's going to be 3. X still stays. Negative 30 divided by 5 is minus 6. Okay, number 4. So our greatest common factor. If we look at all of these, again, our greatest common factor is going to be a 5. We have an a in every single one, so we have 5a. And if we look, we do have a b in every single one, and our smallest b is a b squared. So now we're going to divide everything by 5ab squared. So we have to put 5ab squared in front of our parentheses. 20 divided by 5 is 4. A to the 5th divided by a is an a to the 4th. B to the 4th divided by b squared is ab squared. Now here, this whole thing, everything divides. So what are we left with? Well, we are left with a negative. And if everything divides, gotta think back, what do we put? -1. So this whole thing turns to a -1. Now we have 35 divided by 5, so that's going to be +7. A squared divided by A is an A. B cubed divided by B squared is just a B. Now for your homework, let me see. If we look at number 5 on your homework for today, so 7.1, a worksheet, number 5 is -2x squared minus 14x. Do you see how both of these have a negative? So our greatest common factor is going to be -2. And since they both have an x, we can take out an x. So we're going to have to divide by -2x, divide by -2x. So -2x goes in front of your parentheses. So that divides away. X divides, takes one of the x squared, so we're left with an x. Now here the x's divide, the negatives divide, so we have a plus. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So if all of your terms have a negative, or especially the first term is negative, take out a negative. So let me write that out. So examples of that are going to be 5, 13, 17, 26 in your homework. 22. And one other one I want to talk about is number 7 in your homework. If we have x squared minus 3x plus 8. Well, if we look at 3, it only has factors of 1 and 3. And if we look at 8, it only has factors of 1, 8, 2, and 4. So in this problem, our greatest common factor is actually just a 1, because there's no x's between all of them, and there's no numbers that they share, right? Because this is a 1. So all we write is the word prime. So number 7, you just can write the word prime, but you have to make sure that there's nothing that can come out of our problem.